some of your stuff that you put out there. It says you want quality to be evaluated from the look and feel of it. Sentiment analysis, not scorecard 1 to 10.
Yes, that's pretty much it. I feel like,
It's a great pleasure to have you here, Sankeshwari. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Andre. Great to be here.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. It was a long day for me. Pretty good news, also some sad news, but that's life. Where are you right now? You're in Singapore, right?
So I'm in Singapore, yes. It's a hot, bright, sunny day.
Are you guys still on the lockdown, or did the situation get worse?
No, it got better in a way. Like, we can still go out. We can now go out and just, as long as we wear a mask, so it's not too bad. But the numbers are still going up. It's mostly like the dormitory areas and all of that. But outside, I think it's quite safe to go out and enjoy a meal, meet your friends, as long as you're in groups of 5.
Okay, that's the maximum limit.
Yeah, yes.
So how did you end up in Singapore? I used to live there as well. And I think maybe our reason why we got to Singapore is quite similar. Was it because of the job that you have right now?
Yes, I did move here for a job, and I had no idea about Singapore. I had not come here for any holidays. It was just like kind of crazy, I wouldn't say a whim, but yes, it was one crazy day I decided, well, I want to work in Asia, outside of India. And so I decided to move here.
And now you're working for Autodesk, right?
That's right,
That's
yes.
what we have in common.
Yeah.
So until we get there, so this interview will focus on quality management. That's your current role, Linguistic Quality Manager at Autodesk. So let's start from the very early days. Curious, notorious question, how did you get into localization in the first place?
Okay, so a bit by accident, because I didn't know what localization was. I definitely knew, basic translation, and I was always, passionate about languages. I was learning French, just learning Spanish at a given school and college at Alliance, and, just continued studying at the embassies and consulates that were offering classes in India. And used to do part-time translations, and somehow got into like a freelance, small project at Lionbridge, because they were doing some e-learning courses and they wanted me to validate it. And yeah, that's how it started. So I didn't even know it was called localization back then. And then, after that month got over, they said, oh, this seems good. So would you like to try out something, maybe a full-time role? And I said, yeah, I'm not sure I'm looking at being a part-time translator, because I was also doing my master's in economics. And, I was more about two very different fields. So I said, let me think about it. And then I tried to figure and, ask around what's localization. And people in India back then were like, no idea, because it was not a very common field of work. And translation too wasn't like a, mainstream career option, but there were still translators. So I think it was just like yes, let me give this a shot. This is something new, cool. I love languages. And it just started from there. So it was a very accidental, jump into localization to then learn about localization after getting there. And I started off actually as a language quality manager too. So yeah, it was very interesting, because I applied that knowledge and I got a lot of, trainings, a lot of, knowledge sharing from the teams that exist. And this was in the France office. So it was like a whole, meeting with a new team, new culture, new country. It was like a fantastic experience. And that was like the moment, aha, yes, I think localization is cool. And I should really make that as my career. So that's how I got into it.
And that was really your first job?
Yeah, it was.
Quality management? Was it with Lionbridge?
It was with Lionbridge.
So how would you compare the quality management on the vendor side, or when you first started, and now that you do on the client side, so many years later?
So many years later, it's like poles apart, with Lionbridge, it was a quality management. It was also like managing language leads and, overseeing all the linguistic part of it. And back then, like I said, localization wasn't like a big thing in India. So when we worked on localization quality, it was also trying to just provide what the client wanted. There was no input, like no proactive, I could do this. Like today, if I just jump into something, I know exactly what I want. And back then it was like, they want it this way, so I need to deliver this. So it was just purely meeting expectations. And it was like a backward process where, okay, this is what you want, and then you're going to deliver, not knowing like to get there what you need to do. So yeah, it's really come a long way, apart from the basic things like, you have style, tone, and you adhere to all of that. But yeah, most of the things are, I would say, I would never imagine working in that same way that I did about 15 years ago, and then applying all of that today. Like, I don't apply any of that today, honestly.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because it's outdated, or?
The basics are pretty much the same, how you would go about it, but how you approach it from a more, holistic view is now, right? Then I was so young and it was like, oh, wow, this is cool. So let's approach this, or, this company is doing this. And there wasn't even that much knowledge of, what, yes, of course, there's the vendor and the buyer side. You understand that, but you really do everything to please the client, and you just go with what they say. Versus now, after all these years and having the experiences working on both client and buyer side, you can approach saying, oh, you know what? I think this is probably not the best approach for you. So making that decision and, being courageous enough to say, I know that this works for you, even though you feel that, you want something else, and trying to take that risk to show them how that is the best fit. I think that's something I wouldn't do 15 years ago, and that's come a long way. But of course, basing these decisions on something that I've learned 15 years ago still stays. So it's like being a journey, but yeah, I would say it's not outdated completely, but yeah, some parts of it definitely are.
That's what I got as well on my journey when I was working at Autodesk. Is that more holistic view, like when you zoom out and you understand the other stakeholders that are involved in the localization. So you not only care about your immediate client, which could be, let's say, the project manager or program manager on the client side, but you also start to understand more about the end users. And you care about them, and you try to move the relationship to more like, okay, like you're not just my client, but we are working on this together, and we are doing it for the end users. And not just for the transaction, right?
Yes, right. Absolutely.
What I like what you said is that you know what you want. So what exactly does that mean when it comes to quality management?
So for me, okay, quality management definitely means not just putting what you feel is right, because a lot of times we feel, oh, this works best for a certain market or a certain language. But when it comes to, like you said about the end user, it is eventually about the customer experience, whether it is internal or external. And when you're trying to deliver that, you can't be very rigid about, I feel this is, linguistic quality, or a certain framework says that I have to have, this quality deliverable or a certain score. And you really have to understand what is your audience, where is it going to be used, what is it that they want out of it, and then you try to build or modify or just massage a little bit so it fits for that audience. That to me is linguistic quality, and I've always been an advocate of saying that don't just judge everything very rigidly by, oh, I think this is like a fantastic 4, or this is like, oh, this is really like a poor quality 1 rating translation, because it's a very personal thing, and we are all people, right? Like humans have this tendency where if I'm a person who is very critical of things, I would say, oh, I don't think this is like the best. But maybe for my audience, it is the best. It's just my personal view there. So yeah, I always say that, try to approach something from a more broader audience mindset rather than just, trying to fit it in the boxes that you have checked for your quality standards.
So from what you're saying, my understanding is that we should not make quality subjective to us, to our personality and our views, but rather look at multiple people and how they look at the quality and what the quality means for them. But you still probably need to get some quality evaluation from each of them, and maybe then you average them, or how does it work in practice, what you just shared?
So and this is more of a recent development over the last year or two at the most. So what I'm trying to do is right now, and it's not something that I created. This is like practice at Autodesk. And it's not something that I've seen with other companies that I've worked with, is where we just don't work on a numeric score. We also try to attach a value to it, which would give you an overall feel of the translation. So there are attributes that you would rate a quality of translation based on, how is the overall feel of it. And, in terms of creativity, it could be in terms of the overall understanding level, how is the fluency. And this is separate from, the basic LQA, or the audit forms that we run. So keeping that in mind, I think when we go through that and people rate, probably, let's say I would maybe on a rating of 1 to 5 for a quality score, if, my passing is probably a 3.5, and on a very, on a more concrete scoring basis, I would say that I would give it like a 4. But actually, when you ask me, how do you feel about it? I say, it was great. Like, I probably made some few changes, which is maybe grammar, punctuation, or 1 and 2 terminology. And I think this was really good, is my overall feedback. But that doesn't really translate into how you have rated a translation. So then, trying to understand why did you give that maybe a 3.5, and you are saying that it was good, and you could have easily given it like a 4 or 4.5. So trying to understand that gap, and that is where this part comes in, where you get the overall, feeling or the overall feedback on what a person feels about the translation, and then trying to also get some comments and analyze it to see, okay, this is what the person feels. So these are the target areas I need to focus, which I cannot capture on the very concrete basis of 1, 2, 3, 4.
Right. Okay. We need to get to the bottom of this, or at least I need to get to the bottom of this. I remember when I was there, I think Autodesk was using the standard Lisa model or something like that, where you typically have a reviewer who goes through the text that was translated. They record the errors. They categorize, was this minor, was it major, was it critical? And then in the end, you get a score, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the basis. And then what I understand is that after they finish this rigorous part, then they give their feeling of the translation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you then you try to identify the gap. How exactly do you analyze this feedback from the reviewers? Is there any systematic way how they comment the gap, and how should the gap be closed, or how they feel about their feeling, or or how does it work?
So yes, the gap closing part happens when they do comment, whether it is a third-party reviewer, we have some internal ones, which share some feedback in the form of comments, and then analyzing that comments and then trying to tally that with the score or with the overall feedback they've shared within a specific document is something that I do. It's not left to either a reviewer or probably, some translator who's working on that content, because it has to be a neutral party trying to share the feedback. So that's where I come in. And there is a framework that is created for that. It actually tells you that, if you have like these number of changes, or this is the feedback in the non-numeric value sense, then how does it help, or, how would you then go about bridging that gap between that minor 0.5 or, 1 score, and then get it to the next level. I just cannot share too much about it,
right.
Here, but I do work very closely with the vendor teams or the contacts, and then I try to understand from them that if they have received a specific scoring and this is the feedback, I check with them from purely the linguistic specialist or a lead language translator to understand if they had translated it this way, would it really have changed? And that is also something that I try to discuss with either the stakeholders or the reviewers to understand, do you really feel that this makes that difference? Does this really take it from, great quality to like an excellent one? Or is it just like trying to make a more preferential change and approach to probably helping, it more relatable to the audience, but then still does not mean that it's overall bad. So it's just trying to be like a mediator between two parties, but at the same time trying to make sure that, you're delivering the expectation and fits into the framework that is created. So it's a very customized framework created for like a specific content type, drilling down to literally like even asset levels in some cases, depending on what is the visibility to the customers. And that's something that I've worked on for almost a year and tried to come up with that. Yeah.
You mentioned the content type. Is this framework being used for the most sensitive and the most visible content type, like marketing? Or what kind of frameworks do you use for different types of content?
So it's used across all content. I mean, it could be products or software, documentation, marketing. It could be knowledge-based articles. It could be anything that goes out to the customers, like corporate communications or even legal content. There is like, a whole dissection that happens, and then you figure how many different types of content that we translate. What would be the audiences for that? Sometimes it's like a mix of two content types within a certain asset or within maybe a certain website page that we're working on. So trying to see, what applies for that particular content and what would be the best way to then evaluate the quality based on the types and the framework that we would apply to it.
So does it mean that you have a different, is it like expectation level or for each content type? Like you use the same framework, but you have different, acceptance levels for each content type?
Yes, pretty much. And then there is a customization depending on, if it's a very new content type or we really want to make it high visibility, or we try to tweak that to make it, bring about that result. And then we would be able to evaluate that really this works for us. And sometimes if you get like really brilliant results, then, it's time to think, oh, is that really too lenient? Do we need to tweak it to, try to figure out maybe more issues to improve? So there is always like a lot of adjustment that goes on, a lot of customization, but essentially it's a very robust framework that is created to fit for at least like 50 content types, I would say today.
Is the analysis still manual? Do you have to do it on your own or do you have it somehow automated?
So it's a bit of both. And I would say definitely there is human touch points involved where people help to evaluate in terms of the linguistic quality. But then it goes into the analysis part. And then that's, based on a little bit of AI, a little bit of automation. So that's the part I would say I'm very excited about. And
nice.
It's also a little bit new to me because that's something that I am currently working on. And it's also like an area of interest, a new area of interest that developed over last couple of months. And now that, there is time to explore more and more, there's more ideas coming up every now and then. But that's how the analysis part is going right now. I would say I'm not really there yet. It's still a long way to go where I would want to reach a point where I don't really need to sit down. Right. I would get everything. And then I say like, okay, I would probably want to deep dive into this. But at this point, I would say it's still a bit of human plus machine.
Are you using some commercial solutions or is this internal development?
It's internal development.
Of course. Yeah. As expected. One thing that we were talking about is that how the end user perceives the quality and how that is important so that we don't only give the power to only few individuals in the process. So far, I got the understanding that we are talking mainly about reviewers that are working with Autodesk and they give this analysis, they give the comments, they give the sentiment, how they feel about the quality. But how do you get the feedback from the end users? And how do you work with that?
So I work very closely across, teams, and it's not specific to my current role. I've always been that sort of person who knew from the very beginning that, because I started, like I said, it was like a reverse learning. I went into localization and then I tried to oh, this is how you need to please the client. And then you learn, oh, this is what you can do. So I knew that, the end goal is to make sure that the audience is happy with it. So reaching out to audience for feedback is something I proactively do, and I always have done. So how I do it is either reach out to, internal stakeholders. It could be, anybody in the country offices. It could be marketing teams, product teams. And part of it is to understand, what is not just their expectation, but also when they reach out to people, when they go out to the market and they reach to customers, what are the customers saying about this? And then, there's always a lot of initiatives that go on as part of feedbacks and surveys where you hear from customers and then customers say, oh, I think this is fantastic, or I see this kind of an improvement, or I probably am not very clear about this specific area, or I don't know how to execute certain things when I go to this page, or, when I'm working on a certain, document or instruction manual. And then you try to understand, okay, well, this is the problem. How do I then go and solve it? But the key is to ensure that you don't lose any of that feedback. You're always, trying to get that. You connect with people. You're always establishing that relationship with people, even when it's not about feedback, but you try to constantly build that over a period of time. And that's where the whole networking and engaging part comes into the picture, because that's the only way. There is no way that in any of the roles that I've done, I have reached out directly to the end user or a customer saying, oh, how do you feel about that? It's really rare, unless, you're at a conference and you meet a customer and you walk up and you say, oh, this is what I do. And it has happened. I'm not saying it hasn't, but that's a very limited window. And, once you're out of that 5-minute chat with a person and, the person is a customer, shares, oh, this is I feel fantastic, or I'm very happy reading and I'm bilingual and I've seen your pages in these 2 languages. And then you walk out of there and happy and say, oh, I'm really happy that, the end goal has been achieved. But then that is a very rare phenomenon. You don't really, run into customers to get the feedback. But yeah, we try to either, I would say, team up or, collaborate with people who could share that feedback. And then we can implement all of well, not really all, but most of it to try and get the quality levels up.
I've had once experience at Autodesk getting a feedback from someone from the customer support.
Mm-hmm.
Is that one of the teams that can give you the feedback, or is it actually something, is this feedback sharing happening systematically, or is it only if something really bad happens?
No, I think it happens all the time. In fact, I also run initiatives where I try to proactively reach to people to just get feedback. It's not whether it's just good or bad, it's just feedback. So I wouldn't say it's always fantastic, but I don't think it's been, at least as far as I know, so bad that you have to be oh my God, that's alarming. So yeah, but yeah, it's both. It's positive and negative.
And is there any way for the users when they're, let's say, browsing the site to maybe give a thumbs up or thumbs down, or how do the other teams collect the feedback about your work?
You mean just specific to localization?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, there is a way, there is a place where they can just share feedback in general. I'm not sure about the thumbs up and down part, but yes, they could share what they feel, and they could say I would probably like to see a certain area improved, because it's not very clear, or I'm not sure how to navigate to a specific page with the instructions available. Yes, that is possible, for them. And they could say that it is specific to, this part in Chinese or Japanese or Russian, that would then be analyzed, whether it is really localization, whether it is a globalization, whether it's a software development issue. So that would then be further analyzed. But there is a way for all the customers to share feedback, sure.
So you mentioned the country offices.
Mm-hmm.
I know that was one of the big challenges working at Autodesk, getting the feedback, especially from the Japanese office. That's the most trickiest one. So how do you communicate with them? How do you get their feedback? And how do you maybe connect them with the people who are actually doing the translations so that these two parties are on the same page?
Okay, so, so far, with all the years and everywhere I've worked, I've had a great relationship with country office contacts, because I know that they are the final decision makers. They are people who help. They're people, who can really go a long way to help you even make decisions in areas that they're not really, the decision makers, because they would tell you, yes, this works. And then sometimes you will depend on them and you will rely on them as your partners to help with that. So I've always kept that relationship going. I think, it does take a lot of time and effort to establish that, to keep that running. I have, touch wood, not had any problems trying to get, help from anybody, like any of the country teams ever. And it's really, fantastic, to just go approach them, share the problems and get them to help you. And sometimes, if it's out of their area, they always put you through some other contact who would be able to help. So yeah, I think country office wise, it's really not a problem. And they're always also helpful in terms of working very closely with us. So there are times where, you need to work with translators and you may not have enough knowledge about a specific topic. And maybe it's very specific to the content that is only privy to internal people. And then, subject to the NDAs and, all the agreements and legally what is possible. People do tend to reach out and help. And, maybe I set up meetings sometimes to help them understand a little bit more so they can then understand, learn, and then replicate that in the work that they do. So it definitely helps. One is bring better quality, because that gives them a better understanding after meeting with somebody, either a subject matter expert or somebody who's, even though a translator is local, sometimes, it makes that difference to really sit down with somebody over a quick 30-minute chat and understand, what, yeah. So that really does make a difference. And fortunately, that's worked for me. I've not had any problems with the country office.
That's good for you. I had a question, wait, I lost it. Oh yeah, I was wondering if the people in the country office, if they are actually part of the standard localization process, or when do they actually interact with you?
It's really on a case-to-case basis. It depends. Not something that is set in the workflow, because like I said, the framework that we have in process caters to everything, and it does already consider all the possibilities, all the levels that we would need to deliver a good quality translation. So if there is a need, they're consulted. If we are already, able to deliver without any issues and questions, and there's no need to involve somebody, because they're not part of the localization workflow, right? Country office all the time, but they are people who would be our partners when we need to engage them for any advice or any help or any queries for that matter. So it's really on a, do you really need to consult basis.
One of the main things that I remember, it was a new initiative when I was leaving Autodesk, and that was self-certification of vendors. I'm wondering if it's still going on and how it's working for you, because to me it was something quite revolutionary. I have never experienced it anywhere else, that the client would put so much trust into the vendors to judge their own quality. So I'm wondering, what is your experience with that? Is it still running? What are your results?
No, I would say it's not the same process anymore. Okay. So it changed a while ago. And, I mean, for me, because I came from a place where I've always worked on both sides, and I knew, what was the best approach to it. It's something that, I would say doesn't always work, because at the end of the day, we know it could be the same resource pool. It could be, probably even the same people. And so it is important to have a special, or a dedicated person trying to evaluate quality. So it's not the same people trying to rate the translations. And then I thought it was very important, and we definitely retired that process a long time ago. I don't think it's the best approach. I think it's important to have a third party involvement.
Right. So you basically went to the previous model, right? I think that was there before self-certification.
Oh, we still do self-certification. I think it's quite an important part.
Oh.
Yes, we do. We still do, but we do also have, process where we evaluate on top of the self-certifications.
Mm-hmm.
I would say like self-certification is important because that's just them, the translators trying to tell you that this is the quality that you expect and it's ready to go. But yes, we have to always ensure, from a linguistic quality perspective, that we keep a check on that. We're not just depending on somebody telling you, yes, this is like fantastic. So yes, we do have audits and things in place. And I think that's pretty much like a part of the whole process in terms of linguistic quality evaluation. And I've always even done that on the vendor side. Like if even within like the same vendor company that I work with, I would have like a different team of people review the quality whenever it was possible, probably like a different country office, even, when it's not the client part of it, is still vendor, but have their feedback because, yeah, you just learn a lot more things that you would have never imagined when you get that quality result when some other person puts their set of eyes into it. So yeah, I definitely advocate having neutral party evaluation.
Right. I'm wondering, in your extensive experience, when you joined Autodesk, Autodesk localization model is pretty mature. So I'm wondering how you would approach quality management if the company was just starting with localization. What would you focus on first?
Well, if it is definitely, I think it's definitely more mature, and I wouldn't really, when I started, it was already strong. So it wasn't like, it's not, somebody was managing it before. I did whatever work I've done so far is building on that. It's not trying to do something from scratch. So yeah, I would say it's pretty robust. And if I was starting off and it didn't have anything at all, I would definitely start with quality ratings and evaluations, trying to run several audits, check the quality, get feedback from, country offices, customers, anybody I could reach out to basically. And I would definitely put in place, like, if at all, this is like a company we talk about with no linguistic quality expertise at all. I would say like go to style guides, reference materials, focus on that, tone of voice, what works best for what content. I don't think, it would make sense to just run audits and say, okay, this is what our quality is and that works. I think there is a lot more that goes into quality management, and it's not always on the client side. There's a lot that happens on the vendor side because you need to make sure that the people who work on those translations are continuously educated about the things that are happening, share with them, these are new products, or this is new content, these are new campaigns, how we would be able to brief them whenever something comes in, always ask them, like, is this enough for you? Do you think the references that we provide help you deliver better translations? Do you think the terminology that is shared is enough? And also, opening up and letting them share, okay, I feel, maybe we could change the process this way. And that is something I would say is very typical to Autodesk. I haven't seen that in any of the companies I work with. So I think, yes, trusting the vendors is what you shared earlier is important because on the client side, what happens is people are too focused on delivering or, achieving the goal of good quality localization. Whereas on the vendor side, it is their job to deliver translations, to also, maintain quality, to take care of all of that. And they would be the best team to go to say, how is, you can't just say, I need you to do a better job, or, I want you to improve on quality without understanding how they could get to that better place. So I would always, make sure that when I was starting off something with linguistic quality, I would work first with the core team who's actually delivering that and see, what is it that they need to help me achieve something, and maybe work very collaboratively with them to get all of that material built up. Because at the end of the day, I might say that I want this and you need to get me that. But if I'm not going to help and work with you collectively, you're never going to understand that vision, and I'm not going to understand the style of work. So yeah, it's like work together hand in hand and deliver what's the best for the customers.
Have you always had a good response to such an initiative from the vendor side? I know that many times the vendors can say that this is like an extra effort, and maybe they even want to get paid for this, kind of like training or actually understanding what the quality means for the client. Have you ever struggled with this, or was it always smooth for you?
So I would say like in the different models that I've worked with, right? I mean, if I talk about any of the other places, maybe like I've worked at Cisco earlier, and then I've worked with another company where we work very closely with clients. So we were sitting at the client office, and there, I would say it's not easy to just, approach the vendor, because the model was different from what I'm working on currently at Autodesk. And people would say, oh, I'm putting in 2 hours and I need to be paid for it. Or what I'm learning here is not going to be helping me with any of the other jobs that I do, because it's very specific to your company. So yes, I have faced that challenge, but I think I've also, learned over the last couple of years at Autodesk that vendors here, of course, with linguistic quality specific, I wouldn't be able to comment on the other areas you work on, but it doesn't take them a lot of time or learning, right? They are translators, they're language leads, they're expert in the field. It's just about trying to, see how we can bridge that gap or add something that would really enhance the quality. So those kind of trainings are not specific to, just the content that they work on for a specific client. They also help the person develop themselves. They also learn about industry rather than a specific product, and they could apply that elsewhere. So I wouldn't say that I have never run into that challenge, but I would say more recently, no, because it's also how you're approaching it. And really, if you are bringing some value to it, because, in turn, that's going to add value to you. And you can have that relationship and share that with the vendors you work on. I think that they would be very welcome. And I always say like, oh, you need to pay me for that. So that happens. And of course, we have vendor management to take care of all those conversations. So it's not really something I've come across here specifically, but in the past, yes. And, we always involve either business development or vendor management, depending on which company has what set up. So, yeah.
Greetings to Amish.
Yeah.
You used to work as a TAG, as a transcreation manager. So that's one of the interesting part of localization. I think is kind of like new and like on the rise, all the creative translations. So I'm wondering, how do you measure quality of creative translations? Can you still use the same framework? How does that work?
So for creative translations, I would definitely not use the same framework. Part of it, yes, just for basic punctuation, grammar, and all of that. But overall, I think it needs a special way of handling. So you have to see, the messaging is coming across from the source, because when you work on creative transcreation, it has to seem like it's written in that language and it's not just translated from somewhere. So try to recreate that copy. Even if, you try the best of the translators, it's not going to give you that result. So I have to evaluate it from point of an end user who's native, and try to validate the copy based on, reading English and reading that. And then it's not about, oh, does it really say the same thing? It's like, if this talks about like a very, wonderful afternoon, and then this is like saying, oh, I did like 10 things, so if it sounds like a list of just sharing or replicating that's like bad quality. So I would say, like, when I read that, the way to evaluate is to ensure that if I'm a native speaker for, let's say, Spanish, I want to feel like, oh, this is great. And, I can't even try to imagine what it seems like in English. So, like, not that comparing to like, oh, this is probably what English says in Spanish. It's like, oh, this is really created for the audience. And this is just like a website or a page or a campaign for Spain. And there is a slightly different framework for that, which is built on top of the standard framework to judge all the overall concrete attributes that we have. So yes, that is there. And then there is also something that would specifically rate the creativity factor that is part of the transcreation.
Mm-hmm.
So again, like, sorry, I can't share too much of the detail, but yes, there is a framework, and then there is like a customized level of, I would say, penalties, or how we would rate that, where depending on the kind of visibility also that is associated with that content.
Yeah, is this what you meant? I have a quote here somewhere from some of your stuff that you put out there. It says,
okay.
You want quality to be evaluated from the look and feel of it. Sentiment analysis, not scorecard 1 to 10.
Mm-hmm.
That's it, right?
Yes, that's pretty much it. I feel like, when, like I said earlier, when you try to rate it on a certain number, numbers mean different things to different people. And it is, like I said, you could be a very critical person, and I could be, somebody who's like, yeah, I'm fine. I totally get what this is talking about, and I'm comfortable with it. And maybe, I after a few days, I read something somewhere and I say, oh, you know what? I saw that, and that is fantastic. So this is not good. So even like me, not being a very critical person, would then say, oh no, now I'm critical of this because I read something and I thought that was of a better quality. So I think to, really understand, especially for non-technical content, when you're working on rating quality, it is important to get that more human point of view, because at the end of the day, you're creating all of this content for people, and people are reading it. They're not going to say, oh, I like this translation because, this page is like a perfect 5, or they're not seeing that. They're saying, oh, I don't really understand, what exactly are they trying to communicate here? So it's about how they feel. And that is why I feel like that is something that is very important, and we should always bring that up when we think of evaluating quality. And I would not say it's just for creative content. I would say it's even for, some of the documentation, which is not purely like telling you a step-by-step guide, but just something that is describing functionality. Mm-hmm. Also, if you read through something and it's really boring, like, oh, I don't really want to read it, even in a magazine. But whereas you're reading something, it keeps you engaged. That engagement part only comes from this feedback that you receive from people, and that is why that human, touch. Human feedback or aspect to evaluating quality is what I really believe in.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you. So on the other end of the spectrum, we have machine translation.
Yes.
So how has that evolved when it comes to quality management with regards to MT?
So personally, I would say, like, to me, I think MT is definitely great. I wouldn't say that MT applies or is the best option, especially when it's raw MT for every kind of content. But MT definitely helps, right? I mean, we are moving to a more evolved world today, and, it is important to try and automate things. So if MT is giving you that leverage to minimize time, effort, cost, all of that, it definitely helps as a process. Would I rely on that? Like, just take empty content? Definitely not. But again, there are areas where we could. So I would say, like, just articles like telling you how to install something, or, just knowledge base, basically, those kind of articles. I would say, yes, why not go with MT if you're sure that the quality of your MT is really fantastic. And if it's creative, definitely no. But if it's other content, I would say, like, yes, to go for MT and then post-edit it, because you need to always review the content that you're going to deliver. And there is the quality framework that goes on top of that. We try to make sure that it works. And it's always like going to help you deliver faster and better results as long as you keep a check on that. So it's the responsibility of the translator to make sure they post edit properly, and then for a quality manager perspective to keep checking and to keep sharing feedback. It is very important to keep retraining the engines, no matter how fantastic it is, because content changes every day, right? We're getting so many new things, and I think context is also playing a very critical part. So just getting something churned out of the empty and saying, oh, this works because it matches source and target doesn't always work. So yes, it's definitely helpful, but don't just use it unless you know that you totally agree with using a raw empty content for a specific area or content type. But overall, I would say yes, please evaluate, keep retraining, and always make sure that don't just put it if you're not sure it's great. I've had like some examples in the past where I was working in one of the companies, and there wasn't enough time, and we had to get some translation done overnight. So we reached out to a translator and said, it's like 20,000 words, and can you get yeah, it was crazy, but it was like go to market. There is no way you can do this. Like 20,000 is crazy. So how many people can sit? It's 24 hours. Not overnight. It was 24 hours to go live and say, okay, we can get 20 people, and then we can help people work. Say, okay, how about the consistency? Because there's 20 different styles. We don't know if those 20 people always work on that content. And they said, okay, let's try. We see how we can have more people who work on it, just review it to establish that consistency factor and style and all. I say, okay, fine. And then it was ready in 24 hours, go live. It's up there on the page. And we realized oh my God, it was a disaster because it was all Google translated. And I was 8 years ago, Google Translate wasn't the most fantastic quality, right? And it was really bad MT. So, that's, and those were not even creative, content or nothing that is very high visibility, but still, we got a lot of feedback and people started saying, oh, I'm not really sure, this talks about this. And it was completely different. I mean, I think one was talking about, a color, and one was talking about glass, and, it's totally very, very, different context. So, yeah, that is like a lesson learned, that if you use MT, please keep retraining, please check context, and as much as you can, keep, reviewing, sharing feedback to improve. It's very critical.
How did you get out of that situation?
Oh, we had to redo everything. So we had to ask for more time, and that meant it was probably 10 days of work to take it and then professionally translate, because there was no way at that point we could use any sort of MT. Also, back then MT wasn't the big thing, and not everybody was using it. So lesson learned. And that is also one of the reasons when I started working more on MT content, I was always a bit, not very open to the fact that we should use MT. And I was very critical to that approach. And I said, well, it's fine, but, don't use it for everything. But today, I think with all the developments that we have and, how people continuously keep contributing, I would say it's come a long way. And I would definitely advocate for MT today to begin with as the first approach, and then, review, evaluate, and use it.
I think many of the translators are afraid of their jobs because of MT. And since you witness how the MT quality has progressed, do you think that's something that's possible to happen in the future, that the quality will get to that point where we don't need a translator for many content types?
So I actually had this conversation last month at one of the Lock lunches, and we because there was a group of young translators, and they definitely shared this concern. And what I told them is, you see, MT is, yes, it's a machine. It's gonna maximize all the time, minimize all the time spent and maximize your output, and it's going to just help you work more efficiently. I don't think like even the most fantastic of the MT quality is going to replace every possibility or area where a translator works. Some areas definitely, like I shared, maybe articles or things which are not high visibility, yes. But we would always still need that. And that again brings me to the point where I said I need that human aspect to it, the feedback, because you are creating content for humans. Unless we reach a world where, there is rarely any human interaction. It's like a very sci-fi world where you're not really reading and you just ask the robot. It's like, do this for me and, tell me this and feed it to my brain. I mean, no, that's not going to happen. I do understand the concerns. And yes, maybe, the number of hours that they put in and in terms of, what they were doing 5 years ago and what they would do in the next 10 years is definitely going to change, or how they approach translations is going to change, but it's also going to help them because they don't have to start from scratch. I mean, I remember when I started, it was like I said, there was no localization in India, and I have done translations which are literally on a Word document to then, moving on to the CAT tools and, all these translation management platforms. It's really a long way, and I don't feel that translators, maybe then they felt threatened, like, oh, there's going to be a machine and it's going to show like, 2 side-by-side translations, and do I really need to sit and do everything? Versus today, they are like, yeah, CAT tool, of course, you need it. You can't work without it. Nobody's going to use a Word doc to translate today. So I mean, those threats of 10, 15, 20 years ago are like some of the best things to happen to the industry, and translators would say, yes, we love this. But I think it's going to be the same with MT. It's just going to help them work better, but I don't think they're going to just lose jobs, or it's totally going to ever replace human interactions in the workflow.
I think Veronique Oskaya, not sure if you know her, she was a guest on the podcast as well, and I liked when she referred to MT as a productivity tool. It's just something that helps you be more efficient. That's
exactly.
It.
Yeah.
Okay.
I totally agree. Yeah.
One of the things that I also noted about you is about root cause analysis, and that's one important things that you need to do when you have escalations about quality issues. So I'm wondering if you, and this is where we can go totally in depth so that people know how to do root cause analysis. So how do you do root cause analysis for linguistic issues?
So I would say, like, for me, so I'm not really doing it. I mean, it's the vendor side who would do that, and for me, it would be like if I received a bad feedback on a translation, I would first want them to, analyze that and share what were the areas that led to that. So while they're doing, because you already have the feedback, right? So you know that it was not good in terms of either the messaging wasn't clear, it's not really clear in terms of there's no accuracy with the overall content. And then taking that and then going back and say, you know what, I don't think the messaging is accurate, or you've totally used a different style. I mean, your style is very formal, but this is like a more casual, more informal, maybe like, I don't know, some communication asset, let's say. So go back and say, are you using the right resources? Are you using the right terminology? Are you referencing the style guide? And if, it's a yes to all of that, then say, okay, can you tell me what went wrong here? And this is the feedback. And then I want to see their analysis. After I get the analysis, I would always, set up a meeting and go through that with them and tell them whether I agree or not. And then, if part of the I would say the exercise is for them to learn something out of it, I would try to see if they're lacking that resource, if there's something I can provide. And another way I would, or another step I would take in addition to that is take that feedback and reach out to the person who shared it and, say that, okay, this is what we have come to in terms of our analysis. Do you agree with that? Do you think that if we fix these based on this, would it really help? And a lot of times, we do realize that it is either due to lack of knowledge. And like I said, when you launch a new product or you're working on things which are totally new. I mean, maybe it's like let's say like robots, for example, it's a very, very, high-end robot trying to do things, or maybe helping with medical research for that matter. and your translator is from a field that is working on scientific and technical content, but they may not be the specialist in that specific area. So, just trying to help them a little bit and also work with the user or the person who's sharing the feedback. I always try to bridge that gap. And I don't think that if I keep receiving that same issue over and over, and if the RCA isn't helping, I would not be doing the same process. At that point, I would be like, no, sorry, it's not working, and that's not the problem. We need to really go deep dive into the issue. So I would say, probably like a 2 to 3 step process that I would approach. And I try to close it as early as possible because, the shorter you keep it, the better you have and lesser complaints you have. So,
but what would actually mean? How would it look like if you deep dived into something? Like when the vendor is saying, yes, I will do this. And I've actually experienced that you tell them that this is an issue. When they tell you, yes, we will do this, this, and this to resolve it. It looks fine on the paper, but in reality, they just don't deliver. They don't improve. Do you just work with vendor management, or what does in-depth mean for you?
So in-depth means I don't just rely on that root cause analysis. I always keep going back and I keep tracking it and I keep checking it until a point where I realize, okay, this has really improved and we don't face that issue. So I don't typically wait for somebody to come and say, oh, we have this problem again. I know once it's like analyzed for root cause, it is a problem, and I will keep, tracking that until it's no longer an issue over a period of time. I do also collaborate with the vendor management if it is not something that is improving over a period of time. And then, whatever is the course of action and, as per the processes that they have is then executed. But yes, I will keep typically monitoring, and I would say like over a course of 1 to 2 quarters to make sure we've really crossed that point. Yeah, that's where the automation comes into place, because it was all manual before, but with all of that, it helps, because it is a lot of time investment, and it's not that I'm always, I would say, the expert in a specific language. And maybe I do know a few, and, I can go and approach, or I would go to some people internally and ask, but I couldn't do that with everything. So it is important that I make sure and I keep track of that. And this is going to help me, set a reminder that, 2 months ago you had this, keep checking, is it happening?
I really like that part, yeah, that you are very systematic about them fixing their performance issues.
I mean, I've been a translator, Andre, so I've been through all of that, and that is something that I think, and I'm very happy about. Like in terms of my career, I've always switched from vendor buyer alternately, because I want to learn from the vendor side. I want to bring it to the buyer side, and I know after a few years, I've always heard vendors or the project managers typically say, "Oh wow, you work on the client side. It must be cool." Yes, it is definitely cool, but I would say most of the learning comes on the vendor side. The other ones who are really using technology, trying to innovate. From a product side, I would say yes, the clients do, but that is for their own product. But if you think of localization as an industry, I would say it's always on the vendor side, and there's so much to learn. So yes, these are things that I've learned, some the hard way. Like I said, the translator overnight 20,000 word case, and I wasn't a translator, I was just managing it. But I have been in situations like that. And when I think of, what I could have done, or what is the guidance I would have wanted at that point of time as a translator who was either starting out, or I wasn't a translator for many years, but yes, I would, even today, if I had to sit and translate something, say, oh, is it really good? How would I approach this? How do I evaluate my translation? So these thoughts come to mind, and I definitely, make sure that I apply them to any of the work that, or any of the content that I'm reviewing. And I try to discuss with the vendor partners and say, this is what I think. What do you feel? There are times where they don't agree with a lot of things because, it's not in their best interest. But yes, I mean, I've tried to share as much as I can and say this is what you're going to get in the end. If we if we work together and you spend like 10 hours today trying to learn this and improve this and perfect this, maybe like 6 months down the line, you might not need that. You probably need 2 hours because you already know what it is. You've learned that, you know the process, you know the style, all of it. So yeah, spend some time now because it's going to definitely help you in the future. And outside, like I said, you know, most of my work is not specific to a company or a client. It is general because it's for customers and for anything that, you know, is facing end users. And yeah, I mean, translators work with so many people and so much content. I think it definitely helps to keep sharing that feedback.
Yeah, let's go to the basics. Speak about translators. Just an off-topic question. Well, not that off-topic, but what do you think makes a good translator?
I would say somebody who's definitely knowledgeable about the language, is a native of the language, or at least, you know, been part of that country for many years, understands the culture of the people, you know, understands the markets. And I think it's very important the translator is open to learning because there's so much happening every day and I feel you have to be an open person, right? If you're too close, like oftentimes we see where translators are a bit touchy about receiving feedback and they don't like when you say that, you know, this is not good. And it's understandable. I mean, it's everybody, like all of us, when somebody tells you, I don't think, you know, this is great, or could you just work on it? You feel like, oh, I've put in so much of effort. And it's the same, like with translators. In fact, they're not creating anything on their own unless it's transcreation. They're actually trying to copy something that already exists and create that just for a different audience. So they don't always have that ability to, you know, think and just create. They're just trying to already put what's there into a different language. And so that's, you know, that limits a little bit of their creativity versus what they would do on a copywriting job or a transcreation. So I think that it's very important for them to be open to learning, to accepting feedback, and, you know, applying all of that, like I said, in the native knowledge and the cultural aspects of it, because it helps improve a translation, you know, when they deliver versus something that they just say, okay, this is what I want to do, and I'm going to do this because I need to bring that into another language. So, yep, that's what I would say. And it's important to always be in touch with what's happening in the industry, to be connected to the right people, especially if you're working, you know, maybe like in the field of translating technical content. You need to read articles. You need to know about those products. You can't suddenly jump into some field because you feel that as a translator, you have the capabilities and, you know, the knowledge of the language. That's not enough. You also have to be a little bit, if not like the best subject matter expert, to be able to work on the content.
You talked about change, and my question is, how do you personally look for a change? One of the things that I've noted down here is that you strive to continually expand knowledge and education in localization trends and news. So how do you do that so that we can inspire people who are listening? You mentioned Lock Lunch. That would be a good start.
Okay, yes, definitely. I think Lock Lunch is also one of the, well, I wouldn't say newest because it's been a year that I've been a part of it now. I think it was very interesting to be a part of something on that level because, in Singapore, essentially, you know, it's a very small community for localization. And I have been here for almost 6 years now. And I tried to reach out. So, you know, there were like meetup groups. There are just, you know, subject matter experts in translation or a specific field and all of that. But when I tried to just see if I could be part of groups where I could contribute, learn, it was impossible for me to to join something like that. And when I thought of, how about I create something on my own and, you know, get people, and I didn't really know a lot of people after moving here. So that was a challenge. I mean, if probably I was in Europe, it would be a much easier way for me because I do have the contacts and I know people are more open to these kind of things versus in Asia, it's not so easy to get people to just join, an event or come to an unknown gathering and say, oh, just, network, meet people. Maybe in finance, it works a lot in Singapore because that's like the big industry here, but not for localization. So with Lock Lunch, I think I said, okay, that's a good challenge. It's also something that I'm very passionate about, localization, meeting people, trying to learn new things, how people are approaching, all of the newer processes and happenings in the industry. So yeah, that started last year of May, and it's been fantastic. Like I wouldn't have imagined to have such a big group who's so dedicated. Every meetup that we have, you at least have like 6 to 7 people, and it's a small number if you see, but in terms of Singapore, it's pretty big because this is something that we do in the afternoon at lunch hour or once in a while, over drinks where people come together, they share about their experiences, also how they got into localization, what they do, as part of their jobs, because they're either project managers, business development and localization. Some are even they're having like a full-time role as a project manager maybe, but they also are freelance translating on their own, and they have like their boutique transcreation companies created. And we also have a few people join us every now and then who know nothing about localization, but they just want to learn what it is, because most people feel localization is about and
GPS.
Yes, exactly. And it's very common in Singapore. I've never heard that anywhere outside, but people do feel that. And so we end up having people from different industries thinking this is, like a place where you can meet up people and talk about that. And they say, oh, sorry, I'm a very technical person, and I came here thinking this is going to be about GPS, and it's not. So yeah, I mean, I try to tell them, okay, this is what it is. And then they get interested and they say, oh, we also do that at our company, but I don't know, it's called localization. Some even have in-house teams and they still don't know what localization is. So it's very, very cool. And I think that opened up a lot of other opportunities, one is also trying to be exposed to newer things that are happening, because yes, I do work with vendors, and like I said, I like to continuously learn in terms of what is the most latest in the industry from them or how we can improve. But even on a personal level, to see or to hear about other people's experiences, how they got in here, how they have built themselves or their careers, and again, this not being one of the main industries in Singapore, how do they survive? And because smaller companies don't always last longer here, especially the translation vendors. And so, how they've made that progress from either joining as, an account manager, then moving across business development. They may be started their own companies, or, they got into another field, but then came back to localization. What brings them back? What drives them? So all of these are like really, really very enriching conversations. And I think that definitely helps me know what's happening in the industry. And that is my gateway to industry news specific to Singapore, I would say. And apart from that, because of this whole COVID situation, I've been joining a lot of Lock Lunches online. So that gives me perspective about more evolved markets, I would say, like somewhere in Europe or in the US, where localization has been around for a long time and people are really invested. They at every level, whether it's a translator, whether it is a requester, or whether it is, somebody even writing content like copywriters. So it's really good to hear that and then try to see, how we could put that here. And so many challenges that come across in these conversations where people say, oh, I couldn't attend a specific conference. So why is it? Because they don't really cater for Asian time zones. It's always for either Europe, US, Canada. Sometimes Australia is able to make it, but not most parts of Asia. So yeah, to hear all of that helps. Maybe even share some feedback with some of the organizers that, could you do something in this time zone? And we would be able to, love to attend all of these live. That's part of it. So Lock Lunch, yes, has been played a very important role in doing all of this for me. And
have you attended any of the new online conferences?
Oh, no, I haven't. This year I haven't attended any, but I heard good stuff about the Lock World, Lock World? Sorry, I forgot what. Worldwide, Lock Worldwide. I saw some people post on LinkedIn. I thought it was very interesting. They did the roundtables and, they had actually people on video conferencing. It was nice. Yeah, but I didn't get to attend any of that. I'm sure it was a good experience.
Okay, so what is the other source of your learning?
Yeah, so apart from that, it's definitely reading up a lot. So there's always CSA articles, trying to read everything that is available on either the Taos websites or anything that you come across through the Gala articles that are published. And I also, it's probably like 6 to 7 months now, I'm following Natalie Kelly and all her
articles.
Yes, I think she's impressive. Like she's posting 1 to 2 articles daily. It's like, oh my god, it's unbelievable. It's like I can't even like get to reading 1 article a day, and by the time I'm like on LinkedIn, like, oh my god, there's another one, and it's fantastic. And I would say like, especially in, specifically related to her articles, they're very true. They're very real. They're very like what's happening. They're not sugar coated. It's really, you get what is really happening here.
Yeah.
And I just love her writing style. I think even, compared to the normal reading that I used to do earlier, just maybe like run a Google search, say, oh, I'm interested about this topic and read. I have now cut down and I'm really following that because that is like, I don't know, it'll probably take me like 6 to 8 months to read most of the stuff that she's published just this year. Forget the ones before. So I think that's something I'm very, very hooked onto right now. But yeah, I do pretty much read all of that. And I think access to conferences is also one of the ways I would like to, continue when I have, in terms of upgrading my knowledge about what's happening in the industry, because you meet people and, attending any of the LOC events online that I could have access to, and of course some podcasts. So I do also like I heard about yours more recently when you shared about you're working on podcasts. So I did listen to a few of them, and then I also listened to a podcast from Renato Beniato. So yeah, for about a year or 2, I've been following his podcast too. So yeah, but I don't really, say that I dedicate a certain number of hours a week or a month learning. I think for me, it's just continuously whenever I have the time, like, oh, I heard this or I read this, or, just go search about it and keep myself updated. I'm actually a 1-person team here right now at Autodesk. So it's not like, there's always an opportunity to work closely and discuss with people specific to linguistic quality. Overall, yes, localization, there's like a big team and, everybody's like open to sharing. It's very collaborative, very, very nice people. But specific to linguistic quality, yes, I do rely a lot on people in the industry and try to learn from any of the resources available. And one of the good things that happened with that is I also was part of a TM task force, which is part of the Guild Leaders Forum, but it's managed through a small task force, right? So we worked on the best practices for TM management, and that was a good experience because, again, that was going back to basics, what I learned before, because that's not what I'm working on at Autodesk, but then bringing that aspect of this is the best practice and this is what we're doing. So it's approaching it from both angles and then sharing it as part of that collaborative effort. So, yes, I try to, find ways where I can learn and share and make the best of both.
What was the initiative about? The TM management?
It's about the best practices. So, because people were using different TMs, how often do you clean up? What is your approach to using TMs? Do you have one per product, one per language? And then we had a I think many companies volunteer. So there were either, globalization managers, there were localization managers, not essentially from linguistic quality. Some of them were, yes, for sure. And then we shared, how we were approaching this within our organizations and how that would benefit others. So that was something of a very good experience. And then that also got me access to a lot more people, and I am in touch with them. I also am trying to currently think of, how I could set up something for a linguistic quality management, like a small group where I meet up with people often, and then, they share and I share, and we collaboratively come up with something like a best practices document.
Wasn't Autodesk part of some localization council or something with other companies like Facebook, Apple, and they were sharing the localization practices?
That's the same group. So it's the guild leaders, but that's like director and above are the leaders form. And then, we are like small task force groups
soldiers
who work on other areas. Yeah. But it's the same group, yes, where people like from all the companies who use localization would contribute and share.
So apart from localization, what are you curious about right now? Or if there's anything in localization, you can also mention that, but in general.
In general, I'm just curious now. I'm not curious about localization right now. I'm just curious about when is this coronavirus situation gonna end? Like, it's just crazy, so much of disruption. And I'm just also very curious because I'm reading a lot about it and, trying to understand, like, yes, we know how it started and where it started, but is it ever gonna end? Like, there's like second waves happening and, because I'm from India and I know like back home, it's a really bad state right now. So I'm also curious about why is it getting so crazy, because it's one of the countries that actually had a very early lockdown. And yes, the population is large and all of that, but with so many people literally like not allowed to get out of their houses, how is it still spreading? What is happening? I'm very curious about when it's going to end, when things are going to at least get to maybe not the original state, but at least to a better state of normal than it is right now, because it's really crazy. And the more I read about it, the more it gets me curious. And I think it's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's a good thing for my knowledge upgrade. It's a bad thing because I'm always like, oh, if this happened, then this happened. Then this research says this, and what about that? And sometimes I feel like, oh, maybe I should get into a different field of work now because I'm reading so much about all this medical stuff. So that's what is getting me very curious right now to figure, where and how is this going to end?
Yeah. I was going to make a joke that since you like to switch from the vendor side to the client and then vendor and client, I think the next best fit probably for you would be TransPerfect. Is TransPerfect the one that has majority of their business in life sciences?
Oh, yes. I heard about that. Yes, I think they do. Yes. I know a lot of my ex-colleagues from Lionbridge are at TransPerfect now.
Right.
Yeah.
But how did you get used to working from home with the lockdown? Was it easy for you, or did you prefer working more from the office?
I personally prefer working more from the office. I would say the first few weeks were really challenging because in terms of focus, I wasn't able to, give my 100%, but I think like about 3 weeks into the lockdown, I was okay with it. What I terribly miss is though, being in offices because I can interact with people, I can talk. I don't feel that same, over a Zoom call, even though, we have all of these catch up and, sync ups every now and then. We have like some lunches and it's very interesting, people join and they share how they're going through with all of this situation. But yeah, for me personally, I would love to go back to office. Right now, I am scared to go back to office with the situation, but whenever it's all okay, I would really prefer that. I'm not somebody who can enjoy working in isolation for a long time. Sometimes I like to do focus. Like there are days when I want to just work from home, even in a normal situation before all of this virus started. But yeah, office is like the place. I like to talk to people one-on-one.
How did you learn to get rid of the distractions and be more focused when you started working from home?
So first few days was obviously, working on the dining table and then, you're not in that environment. So you feel like it's a day where you're just taking a day off and you're working on things. And then you're, in the kitchen, you walk around, you're snacking, you're doing all sorts of things. And it's totally like taking the focus away. So I think the first thing what I did was and I had no home office, right? Because I've never worked out of home. So I just like converted my extra bedroom into an office, like got a desk, got a chair, and I said, no, I have to have that environment. I think it's very important. I just enter like this is my office and I'm like coming in and I just, decide that, okay, I'm going to be here. And then I'm just going to get out for lunch and then step back again like it's my office. So that helped definitely focus. The bad part was also because I do know this is at the end of the day my home and I tend to be here at extended hours. So like I'm just in front of the computer and it's like, oh, I'm very comfortable because I'm at home. I don't have to travel. So I end up working really long hours because of that. I think that was like something I had to learn to really cut down on. And that was one of the effects of this work from home during coronavirus. Also, I don't take many breaks because when I was at the dining table, it was all free and easy. But this is like locked in office, like self-lockout.
You're locked within the lockdown, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's something I still need to learn. I haven't gotten to that, and it's also a personality thing. I think I'm very bad at that. Like I'm a very focused person when I do something, so. Even like when you're talking to me and if I'm really like engaged in it, I would probably like not hear anything. Like it's totally blanked out. So I'm very focused or I'm working on something and I can still multitask. So I can probably like talk to you, but I'm totally focused there. But if you're asking me like, something,
what did you eat yesterday?
Yeah, I'll be like, oh, what? No, I don't think I know what you're talking about. So that is something I need to really work on. And I've learned that about me. I've always known that, but I think I've literally like learned that over the last 3 to 4 months that's something I need to work on to like, get out of it after a while and take those breaks and separate the work and home thing.
I think I have it the other way. I feel like whenever I take a break, and I'm also learning to take breaks as well, but I feel like when I take a break, I lose the whole momentum, like the thinking, and when you're in the mode, like in the zone, like it's just work and just whatever, throw at me, I'll just do it one by one. And when you take a break, it's like, I feel like I'm getting more lazy. So I'm trying to be at least strategic with the breaks, like take them later in the day. So I try to start working with the most important things in the morning. And that's also very new to me because to me, my habit is that I try to do the small things and I try to clean them up so that then I feel like, okay, now I finally have time to work on this big one thing. But usually when I get to this point, I'm like, I did so many things today, and the big things are many times not urgent, but they are very important for your life. And then you just keep delaying them and delaying them and delaying them. So now I'm trying to start my day with the biggest thing. So when I complete it, I either zoom through the smaller task even faster than I would have normally. Because if I start with the smaller task, I feel like I'm trying to perfect them, like give them more input than they maybe deserve.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm learning as well. So this is the change that you have gone through recently when it comes to your habits and your behavior. But I'm curious if there's anything you change your mind about, like maybe let's say your worldview or your beliefs, like throughout your life.
Well, I wouldn't say change my mind about, but I think I have been more accepting. So, like before I moved to Singapore, I've lived across a few countries on and off for work. And I always thought moving every 3 to 4 years is the way to go because, well, it's something that I have read. like many years ago, probably still in college. And it was like, it takes you 4 years, like maximum of 4 years, but 2 years is too short to learn about, a place, a culture, a language, really in depth to a level where you can say, I know this, not like just on the surface, but really you can claim that, yes, I do. And for me, I've tried to spend those number of years in whichever place, even if it was not at a continuous period of time, but just, going in and out. And when I moved to Singapore, I did not really think I would stay beyond that, because that was my thinking. And I said, oh, no, this is it. 4 years, you learn, you meet people, you learn about culture, and you move on, and you try to explore as much as possible outside of your, holiday travels and all, because that's not enough time to know. But I think what changed, and maybe it's over the last couple of months, and with this whole situation, and you have more time to really, think about things, I feel no, maybe it's time to not just keep moving like a crazy person. Probably at a certain point of time, you want to just be in one place and just try to see, how it works for you. And I never thought that this would be the country or the place for me to do that. I don't know if that's going to really be true again in the long run, but I just feel over the last few months, I have changed my mindset about, the whole move thing. I feel sometimes it's just good to sink in, take that, and also, not think about too many things, not too much. You can still be in one place and learn, or it could possibly be a result of, yes, I have learned so many things that I'm trying to apply here, and I've had that opportunity to do that. But I don't know. So that is something that I have changed my thinking about, to be a little bit more patient about things and not be very too excited about all the new things that are to come. But I'm still excited about things, and I'm a person who just loves to, learn about new things and still see, what is out there to explore.
Mm-hmm. I can kind of relate to that. I also moved through different countries. I always thought that it's because I'm moving forward with my life. It's a step forward. But one of my friends gave me this idea that maybe I'm just running away from things. So I don't know. I still don't know about it. But I really like Canada now that I'm here. And that's what I thought about Singapore as well when I first moved to Singapore. I really like Singapore. This could be it. But, well, a few years later, I'm in Canada.
It's a lovely place, Singapore, except for the weather. It's just always hotter, and gets worse. And when it's humid, it's unbearable. So, but how many years have you been in Canada?
It's going to be 2 years now.
2 years, okay.
Yes, I moved here August 2018, so
okay,
exactly 2 years now.
And you have seasons there, right?
We do have seasons here, yes. We have a winter.
Which we don't here.
I know.
So I missed that.
Well, you do have seasons, right? It's raining or not raining.
Yeah, so the season changes every day, probably twice a day, right? Because it's raining.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, I miss seasons. In India, I loved, every 3 months there's a new season, 3 to 4 months. So that was good.
What do you think is wrong with our industry?
What is wrong with our industry? Well, I wouldn't say that there's anything wrong with the industry. But I have, not very related, but what I learned lately is actually a good thing. I thought that earlier people always had this approach to maybe it's a very closed community, because it's not so wide as an industry, especially around this part of the world. And most of the groups tend to work or stay within the group. So, if you know that, okay, I've worked with this specific person or this company, as a vendor, I will always go to them because I'm more comfortable to them. And then most of the jobs that went out were concentrated there. People weren't very open to exploring newer options unless, it was really necessary for them, or they had issues with the current process or people that they're working with, which is not a bad thing. And, if it's working out, why change it if nothing is broken? But sometimes you just need to, learn and see what's out there. And what I experienced over the last couple of months, and even more personally, where a lot of people lost jobs with this situation, and they were looking out. And if this was the industry, probably 1, 2, 3, I don't know, a few years ago, That would be like everybody's running because they want like the best of the jobs, and they're like, oh, this is there, so I think I should go this because it works for me. But what I saw over the last few months, it's just so amazing because people are reaching out. Oh, you know what? I know this contact and they have a job, and I know you're looking for one. It's the whole sharing and, like really trying to be there. That empathy was just phenomenal. Even as part of Lock Lunch, I mean, the founder, Jan, he tried to reach out to all of us as ambassadors, and he told us, people are looking for jobs right now, and I'm going to start collecting and, create like some repository and share it with anybody who's looking. So if please reach out. If you know something, share it out, send it to people, all your industry contacts, even people that you don't know, whatever it is, just post, even if it's not within your company. So try to help as much as possible. I don't think I have seen that before, and it's not specific to the industry. I get it. It's happening everywhere, but I think for localization, I have never seen that level of involvement to help somebody across the board, So, and it was globally. So I thought that was something which was a change, and it was a nice change to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels more like a community rather than people just trying to stab each other, right, for the job.
Yeah, there was no like purely business approach to this. It was really about helping people.
What is something people seem to misunderstand about you?
Misunderstand about me? I don't really, I can't think at the top of my head, but I would say like a lot of times people, especially here, not exposed to India as a country, because they say like, okay, you come from India, they have a certain perception, and they feel like, okay, you're probably, tied very closely to your culture, to religion. They bring a lot of aspects, and they try to fit you in a box because of either the documentaries that they see on TV, or they feel like Indians are supposed to behave a certain way and dress a certain way and speak a certain way. And I think that's before meeting. But when, after meeting me, they're like, oh, are you from India? Which part of India are you from? And they also have this, like they've assumed I speak Tamil, especially in Singapore. I don't know why, but it's not the language. Or they say, do you speak Hindu? Hindu is not a language. So I've heard a lot of strange things, and they always like say, oh, you have to be behaving a certain way. You have to have a certain diet. These are things people assume. But I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it just helps them like open up a box of surprises, like, oh, people do that in India. Oh, that is how it is. And yeah. And they also expect you to be, I would say, a bit shy, the typical Indian image. They also expect you to, maybe like, I don't know how to put this, not be very aggressive, because that's not how they see, an Indian woman. And then when you go like, oh my God, you're like, okay,
you're aggressive.
Then they say, no, I mean, in some ways, right? Or they don't feel that you can be really very assertive in many places. So yeah, I do get that, but I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just around here because there is a huge Indian population. They've interacted with people, which is like a different lifestyle or how they behave. And also they feel that, on a more personal and, not from where I come or anything, I think misunderstand. People feel that I'm very, very reserved, like I'm not a very open, outgoing person. And then maybe like after talking or meeting, and then just like, oh, okay, I thought, you were a different person. And I get that a lot. I've got that at every place that I've worked at in Singapore. Most of the people that I've met with, and they're like, oh, well, the first time I met you, I didn't really think, it was gonna be like this, or we would be meeting and talking like all this time. So
you can share with them this podcast.
Yeah.
Before you meet me, listen to this. This is who I really am. Because that was my first impression when we had our intro call, that you were like very, is it jolly, the word? Like, like very happy, talk. So I would never say that you're reserved. Never.
I think it also comes as, sometimes with being in a role where you're always, either one or two people. It's not always a big team when it comes to linguistic quality. So you are not like always like open about a lot of things, and you start off at a new place. You're very, okay, I need to gauge, what is happening or how I want to position things. Do I need to approach it in a certain way? And I think it's just because of that. And also comes with, you work with so many people and you're exposed to so many cultures. You don't want to come off as offensive and just go like, hey, hi, how are you? Ooh, I'm so-and-so. And in some cultures, they don't like it. Right? They just want it to be like very quiet. And
I want to quickly go back to when you said that maybe people don't expect you to be assertive. I think maybe we were even discussing this at some point together. I was asking for your advice. So my question is, did you have to learn to be assertive? Was that not how you were before, or was it always like that for you?
Yeah, I wasn't really assertive to begin with. I think it just came as part of, the learnings over the years and, even a little bit of career progression, because when you're young and you're starting out, you don't really think of, everything that you say. It's not calculated. But at the same time, you don't want to say something stupid and really impose your point, because you don't want to come out as, this person is saying these things. So you're also protective of your image in a way. But as you grow and, you learn more things, you're exposed to people, you meet more people, you learn about experiences, you realize it's okay to bring your point across. It's okay if you believe in it and you know that, you can do something about it, or, it's the right thing. It's okay to just share it and, stand by what you say. So it did come as, something later on in life over experience, not something that was me as a person from the beginning.
One of the things that I was struggling with, and I'm still struggling with, is sometimes I have the fear that when I say something, it will come off negatively for the other people. So I'm pretty sure that you have probably also burned yourself a few times when you try to be assertive and it was not the right time or place to say certain things. Do you now try to always say whatever you think, but try to say it in a nice, neutral way? Or do you still think there are times when we shouldn't say something that's on our mind?
So, yes, it did happen. And, I do not always just say whatever I want to. I will always process it before I do. Also because, I said people misunderstand sometimes since they don't expect that sudden shootout coming their way. And and that is why there is also a need to be a little bit more sensitive. And in different countries, different cultures, different personalities, people are going to take it a different way. So I try to say it. Yes, I do, think over it before I say it. And not necessarily that I always say everything, but I feel that, yes, if I can tell that person something or help the situation, or it's going to benefit something on a larger level, I would. But there are some times where I feel like it's best not to, because you realize it's not going to help anybody. And maybe at that point of time, it's not the best thing to say. But yeah, don't just say that it's gone and throw it out, because you can bring it up at a time where it's more appropriate, and whoever you're sharing it with is in a better position to take that. Not in a very heated discussion. You don't want to be too assertive on a point that you think is not going to benefit either way and it's going to get tossed out. But have more calmer discussion with somebody and say, this is what I feel, and because of all of these things, maybe try to build a background to it. So lead your way into it and then say, and that is why I think we should do it. So before you say you should, you have some background to it that's going to help that person believe that, yes, this really is going to help.
So what would be your final words? Now is your moment to speak to the localization community outside of Singapore and outside of your lock lunch.
Well, I would say I would just tell them that, it's so wonderful to see the whole community spirit that came out over the last couple of months. Just keep it going, even after the situation is better, because it brings that connection And that is very important because at the end of the day, it's a small industry. We really, work with each other, whether we know each other or not. At some point of time, we meet each other, we share, our experiences, our learnings. And I think it's important to be connected, like a very close-knit community, and also like keep sharing. I think it's so amazing that the things people have shared over the last couple of months, because they've had the time to do that, which they did not. I think that's a good practice. And
Right.
that's something I should actually also tell myself, that I have to keep sharing the learning. So yeah, just keep learning and keep sharing. I think that helps everybody.
Well, you did that right here, right? You shared a lot of your
Yeah.
practices, your journey, your experience. So I want to thank you very much for that, Sankeshwari. Thank you for the lovely
Thank
interview.
you for setting this up, Andre. It was really lovely to share all of this.
Thank you very much, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
You too. Thank you. Bye-bye.